Hi, welcome to the Tournament Center. I'm Zac Hill here with Pro Tour champion Tom Martell. Tom, what are you playing today?
So we decided for standard we're going to actually go ahead and play blue, white, red flash.
Okay.
So I prepared for this tournament with Shahar Shenhar,
Awesome.
who's one of the at-large competitors. Really kind of the young guns of the Pro Tour. It's my first time working with him. We had a lot of fun testing, and we both are really drawn to this deck for kind of where it's positioned in the current format.
I'll let him know that you called him one of the young guns of the Pro Tour. All right, let's take a look at some of the cards in the deck. Now, I actually want to start out with the one card you're not totally sure about. Now, Tom doesn't have to submit his deck until later on tonight, so you still players making last-minute decisions. This 4 copies of Augur of Bolas. Now, it's not something we see all the time. What's currently in flux about that slot?
Sure. So it definitely is one of the tension points in the deck is the balance between Augurs of Bolas, number of spells you have, number of lands you're playing. And it's kind of this dynamic give and take there. So if you look at some of the lists that have done well recently, Dave Shields and Jerry Thompson, as well as Alexander Hayne just won a GP with this list. They're all debating between 3 and 4. So we'll either be playing the 4th Augur of Bolas, a 4th Think Twice, or a 26th land, 2 of those 3. So one of those has to go. If you cut the Think Twice, your Augurs get worse, right? You cut the land, then you're getting a little mana constrained. You cut the Augur, you might get flooded. So we're kind of not sure exactly where it's going to wind up.
Totally. So a lot of thought about one slot, but anyway, we're leaning toward Augur right now. Now, Snapcaster Mage, again, has been a part of the format a long time.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But there is one thing I want to address, which is just one of the hottest cards coming out of Magic 2014 is Scavenging Ooze. Obviously makes Mage a lot weaker. Is it still just so good that you need to play it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, definitely Scavenging Ooze is going to have an impact on the format. But if you look at the decks that are being played, there's not really that big of a home for it. Jund obviously plays several copies. We have a lot of ways to kill it, a lot of ways to remove it, whether it's Wraths, whether it's Warleader Helix doing 4 damage. Turn and burn not as great because the +1/+1 counters stay on, making it a little bit tricky. But I think you can definitely still set up your Snapcaster Mages. And then outside of Jund, there's not really a natural home for a lot of Scavenging Oozes, so we don't think it's going to be a very prevalent card in tomorrow's tournament. We could be wrong. Maybe a lot of people are playing it in Junk Aristocrats or these other decks that have been kind of sub-themed. But we feel like this power of this card is just so over the top, and it's so good against all the aggro decks. You pillar their 1-drop, then on turn 3 you pillar a Burning Tree Emissary. There's a ton of upside there.
Right, you can't always just hedge all of the time.
Right, exactly.
Okay,
exactly.
so and then Restoration Angel, obviously, you've seen the card for a while, really good.
Yes,
all right, let's take a look at some of the, let's look at some of the removal spells that you have been talking about. Now, kind of a variety right here. We see 3 pillar, 1 Izzet Charm, which is obviously more than a burn spell. 2 Warleader's Helix, which a lot of people has sort of as a sleeper hit coming out of Dragon's Maze, and 1 copy of Turn and Burn. Really interesting mix of spells. How did you kind of get to that point?
Yeah, I think you definitely, since you see a lot of cards with all your Think Twices that are digging, with your Sphinx Revelations, which I'm sure we'll get to in a moment, you want to have a lot of kind of varied answers. There are certainly a lot of varied threats in the format. So pillar is very important. One of the big differentiators between this deck and straight blue-white flash is the ability to kill early creatures with this Pillar Flame. So whether it's Xanthid Necromancer, one of the other new hits from M14 that you're seeing in all these kind of black-white tokens and these human aristocrat decks, you need to be able to kill the guy when he shows up. 2 damage is the way to do that. Whether it's Scavenging Ooze, like you mentioned, when there's no creatures yet in the graveyard, it's important to have that cheap removal. Izzet Charm, much more flexible, but you don't want to draw a lot of them. You're paying 2 mana for 2 damage, 2 mana for a miscalculation. You're overpaying for all the modes, but that diversity makes it kind of a really nice one-of. And then Warleader Helix, gaining that 4 life back is so huge in the aggro matchups that it makes up for it costing 4. You can't play 4 of them because then your curve starts getting really, really heavy on the tail side of things, but you want to have some of that later. Also, late game, a great Snapcaster Mage target. And the 1 Turn and Burn kind of a catch-all, whether people, maybe there's a deck that starts taking advantage of Archangel of Thune. You want to wait to kill it on site. Whether there's a deck that has Rurik Thars, for instance, which can be a very scary card for this deck. Having 1 sort of catch-all answer that has some utility early on with the burn side lets you get there in the late game too.
Totally, and of course deals with Thragtusk, which
also
is
a nice one to handle on site.
Totally. So there's ways to kill creatures that are not just burn spells. Tom's playing a few of those too. We can go ahead and look at those. We see Azorius Charm over here, Supreme Verdict, and actually quite a few counterspells. 3 Syncopates, 2 Dissipates. And obviously Cavern of Souls, big card in the format. It seems like you're not too worried about that.
I mean, the nice thing with Cavern of Souls is one, all these decks are playing diverse creature types. So they can't cavern everything, and you want to have some kind of answer there when they either don't draw cavern or they just don't have it in, or they name the wrong creature type there. Also, you can't cavern, Planeswalkers. So even against Jund, say they play Cavern on Beast, they start resolving Thragtusks, you still need to be able to stop their Garrix, you still need to be able to stop their their other spell threats, Rakdos Return. There's a lot of very powerful spells in this format, so we feel like having flexible counters, Syncopate is actually good against the aggro deck still, on turn
Right,
2 on the
just
play.
cast it for 2 mana.
Exactly. Yeah. That's really huge. So a lot of these decks typically play 1 Rewind in one of these Syncopate slots, and we both, Shahar and I, feel like 4 mana is too clunky. Rewind's awesome against Jund, let's say, because you can rewind, untap your lands and still play another spell.
Yeah.
But it's all the aggro decks. You need to be biasing your game so much towards the front end that we didn't want to have one more clunky kind of counterspell slot. And on the kind of the other creature removal we see here, Azorius Charm is great in the tempo matchups. Whether you're putting a Falcon Ether script back on top, you're putting a creature that's gotten kind of out of hand.
Right.
Whether it's a Chandra's Phoenix, something like that. But when the matchup is not good, it cycles, which is awesome. And then Supreme Verdict, this is a card that I think fell out of favor for a little while in this style of deck, but right now it's so important that Bant Hexproof is a big matchup. All the token decks, you need to have some kind of catch-all to draw into.
Cool. All right, so we're going to take a brief look at the mana base, but there's one specific land I want to bring up. Sorry, I guess I'm getting ahead of myself.
A little bit of card drawing here.
Weirdly, you play Sphinx's Revelation.
Shocking, I know.
Now, Think Twice actually does deserve a little bit of explanation. It's a card, your rate is not very good. It's 5 mana for 2 cards. Why do all of these decks play 4 Think Twice?
It's just a bridge, right? You do it on turn 2 because there's not a lot of turn 2 plays in the deck, and it helps you smooth out your land draws. And then later on, when you don't have a lot going on, you can cash in the other half.
Sure.
So it's very different than obviously a 5 mana draw 2, which would be unplayable. It's pay 2 now and then catch it up on the back end, just much later. Hopefully.
So it's essentially what you need when you need it, even if the rate totally isn't good.
Absolutely. It's a kind of concession to the fact that you don't want to flood. And so you can't play quite as many lands as you would otherwise want in this sort of a deck.
Exactly. And speaking of the lands, I'll try to transition properly this time. We have 2 Moorland Haunts. Now, I want to get to the sideboard really quickly, but there's a lot of stuff that can go in the slot. And not all, you don't have Rune Chanter's Pike. You don't have any way to make the token bigger. Why is it worth playing 2 of these? So
we did some testing, and this seems like the best of the colorless lands you can play. So I don't think Ghost Quarter or the new Ghost Quarter, whose name is escaping me, the new Tectonic Edge.
Wastes,
thank you, Encroaching Wastes. I don't think either of those 2 cards really does enough in this format right now. There's not that many threatening lands, with the exception maybe of Kessig Wolf run out of Jund.
Sure.
So you want some way to be able to get some late game power. Otherwise, without this, our ways of killing them are just our Restoration Angels, hitting them a bunch, and then burning them out with maybe a couple of Helixes. This gives us some way to get something going on a little bit later and to sink some of our mana towards the later part of the game.
All right, makes sense. So there's the lands that do stuff. There's also the lands that cast spells. Let's get through these really quickly. You see, obviously, your Ravnica dual lands. Turns out they're still good. You've also got the next cycle lands, the M10 lands, and the corollary that came out later. You've got Sulfur Falls, Clifftop Retreat, and Glacial Fortress. If you spend 15 seconds, 1 island. Now, there's Burning Earth in this format. There's Ghost Quarter in this format. Does that 1 basic land make you nervous?
Not really. So I don't think Ghost Quarter is really that big of a threat against this deck. People aren't really cashing that in here. The 1 island, certainly Burning Earth, like you mentioned, is the real threat there. And the real distinction, the choice we made was we want to play blue-white, which gets 15 or 14 basic lands, and it's almost immune to Burning Earth. We're going to play this deck and concede that we're going to have a hard time with the card, but hopefully it won't be there that much. Maybe we're wrong. Maybe the CFB guys are all show playing red-green aggro, which is certainly in their range. Brian Kibler's certainly cast a Mana Barbs in his day, but our bet is that they probably won't. And even if they do, we have enough other ways to interact with it. We do have all those counterspells that we saw, the syncopates and other things, so that we think we can fight that in other ways.
Totally. All right, so let's take a look at the sideboard now. I kind of grouped things in a way that isn't necessarily how it'll pan out in reality, but Thundermaw Hellkite, Staticaster, Detention Sphere, all really good against tokens, obviously, but also do completely different things. What are these cards important?
Well, Thundermaw Hellkite's really important. So it's our way of going more aggro in all the matchups where we feel like we might be a little bit behind. So whether it's against Jund or you want to put a clock on them, if you give them infinite time, they're going to keep drawing 2-for-1 cards, which is all that Jund contains, and they're going to eventually pull ahead of you. So you want some way to put a clock and end that game quickly. We played Hellkite over Aetherling, which you can also see in this slot. Small chance we end up going 2 Hellkites and 1 Aetherling, just as another asterisk. But it's that finisher slot that lets you accelerate a game plan. Staticaster, great against all the 1-toughness creatures, obviously. So whether it's Lingering Souls tokens, which are very close to my heart, I hate playing a card that's so good against them. But I recognize its power, certainly. Or also now there's this new elf deck that people have been playing. We just saw William Jensen finish in the finals of an SCG tournament with this. It's actually a creation of Zvi Mauschwitz and some other members of Team SCG Black. Godanis Vajuris put a lot of work into that. So if that makes a splash here, this is the best card against them. So we want to have something where to kind of clean up the small creatures. And then D-Sphere is just kind of a great way to kind of catch everything that might be out there. Whether it's Planeswalkers, whether it's a bunch of Burning Tree emissaries out of the red-green aggro deck. This gives you a lot of flexible play on turn 3 for hard to deal with creatures.
And really, this deck is largely about having some catch-all solutions that keep you alive until you just cast Sphinx's Revelation and win the game.
That is kind of plan A.
And then finally, some more catch-all solutions, I think. We see Celestial Flare, Negate, Negate, Dispel, Turn and Burn. You've talked about Turn and Burn. Dispel, great in Sphinx's Revelation fights.
Yep.
Negate, obviously, you know, it's a sideboard card that's been a sideboard card for a while. Really quick, though, what is Celestial Flare important for as a new M14 card?
Celestial Flare seems like the best solution to all the mana hexproof decks.
Sure.
I don't expect it to be a big player here. You know, typically in this sort of a tournament, you know, people don't like playing the glass cannon decks as much. But in case they do, we're ready. It also comes in against all the aggro creature decks. Is just another good 2-mana way to interact with them. It takes out their worst guy, but its upside against the ban decks is so high that it's worth that cost.
You basically just want to stay alive against aggro. It doesn't matter how you're killing them.
Precisely.
creatures.
And the one concession here, we don't have any Ratchet Bombs. That's the one other card I think you often see in these kind of decks. We felt like it's a little bit too slow. Maybe one works its way in here somewhere. Just again, as another way to kill a Burning Earth that resolves.
Totally.
But we want to be more proactive and just more immediate in our responses. When things we can cast that turn, not we play it and it's suspended for 5 turns and then it does something.
Right. All right. Thank you so much, Tom. Tom Martell with Team SCG Black. I'm Zac Hill here at the Tournament Center, and let's kick it right back and watch some more Magic.